A late summer storm had drenched Riverdale, fat drops rolling off plane tree leaves and smearing the Maybach's tinted windows into a watercolor of wealth. In the back seat, Lucien pinched the last ember of his cigar, the heat finally pricking his fingers. Only then did he stub it out in the crystal ashtray. "Caldwell. We've reached Caldwell," the chauffeur murmured. Opening the door, Lucien stepped out into the blaze of light pouring from the ancestral house. Tonight's gala would announce the strategic marriage of Caldwell and Sterling, and every bold-faced name in town was already inside, drinking, networking, gossiping. The groom himself was a full hour late, heir to half of Caldwell's empire at 25. Lucien was the prince every deb dreamed of bagging, ruthless in the boardroom, ice-cold in a tux. He had exactly 2 words for this merger of bloodlines and balance sheets: pure contempt. Sterling's daughter, Sophie, checked every box on the society scorecard, pedigreed, soft-spoken, accomplished. Under her touch, Sterling's revenues had doubled in 2 years. In Lucien's eyes, she was simply another asset on the ledger. The instant he crossed the marble threshold, conversation dipped like a faulty stock chart. He ignored the stares and headed for the dais. His father, Victor, caught his elbow, voice low and sharp. "Lucien, dial it down." Lucien didn't answer. His gaze swept the ballroom and snagged on Sophie, half hidden behind a cluster of donors. She wore moonwhite couture, her hair twisted up to expose the elegant line of her neck. A flute of champagne rested in her hand, and she listened to some matron's anecdote with a smile so perfectly calibrated it could have been insured. She seemed untouched by the brass band frenzy around her, a still life inside a hurricane. When she felt his stare, she lifted her eyes. There was no flutter, no blush, just a measured nod before she turned back to her companion. Only the sudden hitch in her pulse betrayed her. She prayed the diamonds at her throat distracted from it. Sophie had, of course, memorized Lucien's resume, the magazine covers, the keynote photos, the billion-dollar exits. Years earlier, at a charity auction, she'd glimpsed him laughing with a senator, confidence fizzing off him like champagne. The image had lodged in a corner of her heart she never dusted. The Sterlings had entered this engagement under pressure, yet a treacherous bud of hope had sprouted in Sophie. Maybe proximity would soften him. Maybe, against the odds, this contract could grow into something that felt like love. She crossed the floor and stationed herself at his side, smile intact. "Caldwell, boardrooms wait for no one. Your tardiness is almost forgivable." He tasted the whiskey a waiter handed him, eyes arctic. "Glad to see you're realistic about our arrangement. I'll honor the contract. Nothing more." Sophie's knuckles whitened around the stem of her glass. She kept her voice light. "Relax. I'm here for Sterling, not for sunsets and love songs." She tilted her head in a polite half-bow and glided away. Near the terrace doors she paused beside Adrian. They had grown up together. Adrian, heir to Vance, the boy who once helped her fly kites on the marina. Concern clouded his face. "Sophie, are you sure about this?" She avoided his gaze. "Adrian, don't call me that anymore. Soon I'll be Caldwell. We should keep our distance." She had buried every what-if the night she signed the engagement letter. Adrian's tenderness belonged to a life she no longer owned. She slipped through the crowd without looking back. Adrian watched her go, champagne trembling in his flute. He had missed his moment, and he knew it. At 11 sharp, Victor and Sterling summoned the couple to the staircase. Flashbolts exploded as Lucien and Sophie posed, the perfect merger in human form. His hand rested on the small of her back, polite, proprietary, impersonal. Sophie felt the heat of his palm through silk and tried not to stiffen. The flashbulbs captured a fairy tale freeze frame no one would bother to fact-check. Later, Lucien's driver eased the Maybach to the Sterling gates. The cabin felt like an elevator stalled between floors. Sophie studied the blur of neon. Already scripting tomorrow, learn his menu, learn his calendar, learn the topography of his silences. "Sophie," Lucien said without turning, after the license is filed, "we stay out of each other's way. In public we'll play the happy brand, nothing else." She angled toward him, memorizing the stony cut of his profile. "Understood." The car stopped. She unlatched her seatbelt, but his voice pinned her once more. "City, 9 a.m. Don't be late." She answered with a soft, "Okay," stepped into the night, and pressed her spine to the front door only after it shut. Her cheeks burned beneath the cool marble of her palms. Morning came fast. They met under the brutalist portico of City. Signed, posed, signed again. The photographer asked them to tilt their heads together. Lucien's impatient scowl softened by a millimeter. Arms slung around her shoulders like an afterthought. The resulting photo was flawless. The heir and his jewel box bride. Sophie stared at the license all the way home, letting herself imagine, just for a second, that the smile in the photo was real. Chapter 2, Quiet Hope and Calculated Distance. True to his word, Lucien drew borders inside Caldwell vast enough to house separate zip codes. They occupied opposite wings, intersecting only at mandatory family dinners or press junkets. Yet Sophie refused to surrender surrender the small, stubborn candle of hope she sheltered. She began, stealthily, to map his preferences. The housekeeper confided that his stomach rebelled against spice and oil. So at dawn she simmered gentle congee, milky rice, shredded chicken, a single scallion, carried it upstairs on a lacquered tray, only to retrieve it hours later, untouched. She learned he drank single-origin pour-over coffee, enrolled in a barista course, and dialed in grind size until the stopwatch read 3:15. Each carafe was either whisked away by his assistant or left to cool, then poured down the drain. She played the perfect Caldwell. Budgets balanced, staff scheduled, reporters charmed, every gown steamed before its gala. When whispers drifted down the corridor of another model escorted home at 2 a.m., she lowered her eyes and refilled the centerpiece with white roses. Surely, she told herself, the ice would crack. Habits warmed, glaciers shifted, just slowly. Instead, the tests escalated. She planned an intimate family dinner. Sterling, Victor, a chef flown in from Lyon, Lucien arrived with 10 rowdy friends reeking of cigars and tequila, commandeered the dining room for poker, flicked a crab claw onto the linen, and announced, Sterling's cooking, mediocre at best. The chandelier rang with laughter. Sophie swallowed the sting and apologized to the chef. A month later, her signature jewelry showcase collided with a spontaneous client summit. Lucien demanded she attend. She pleaded for 30 minutes. He sent the car at noon and refused to leave without her. The keynote began while she was still gridlocked across town. She arrived disheveled, heels in hand, smiles soldered on. Afterward, he appraised her with detached curiosity, as if she were a bond whose yield had finally slipped. Each time she smiled, thanked, fixed. Each night she pressed cold compresses to swollen eyes before the mirror, repeating, patience, patience. As for Adrian, she kept oceans between them. His messages, how are you holding up, earned two-word replies. The pastel macarons he couriered from their childhood bakery reappeared at Vance's mailroom, box unopened. She could not afford the luxury of nostalgia. One waver might shatter the armor she polished every dawn. Inside Caldwell, the congee still steamed at sunrise. The pour-over still dripped at 210 degrees. And somewhere on the third floor, a door stayed locked. A reminder that you can lead a heart to water, but you cannot make it feel. One afternoon Sophie was picking out a gift at the mall when she ran into Adrian. His face lit up with surprise. He stepped forward, ready to talk. Sophie took an immediate step back, putting deliberate space between them, her tone coolly distant. Adrian, long time no see. I have to run. Watching her hurry away, Adrian's chest filled with loss. He knew she was only trying to stay within the lines. Yet her careful, self-protective resolve broke his heart. Inside, Sophie felt just as bruised. Adrian's gentleness had once been the light of her youth, but she was Lucien's wife now. She had to slice every old feeling clean away. Each time she pushed him aside, she was forcing herself to forget every warm memory. Lucien approved of her good sense. Yet the approval came laced with restlessness. He wanted to see her composure slip, wanted to watch her peel off that perfect mask. Yet she handled every test without a tremor. The lack of control irked him more than he cared to admit. That evening the Caldwell family dinner was called to order. Melody, Lucien's sister, decided to stir the pot. In front of everyone she said sweetly, Sister-in-law, you're a jewelry designer, so how come you never wear a decent necklace? Could it be that my brother doesn't spoil you at all? Sophie's face flamed scarlet. She stood frozen, unsure how to answer. Without warning Lucien spoke. Since when do you get to worry about my wife's jewelry? He slipped a hand into his jacket, pulled out a velvet box, and offered it to Sophie. I picked this up at auction the other day. Put it on. Inside lay a starlight sapphire necklace, dark blue fire that seemed to drink the chandelier's light. It was the first gift he had ever given her. Sophie's fingers trembled as she unclasped it and let the stones fall against her throat. When she lifted her gaze he was already looking elsewhere, as though he had merely tossed off a trivial courtesy. Yet the small stone had dropped straight into her heart, sending ripples everywhere. Maybe, she dared to think, he didn't actually hate her. The hope, once fed, swelled a little more. Chapter 3, Warming Coals and a Summit of Hope. After that dinner Lucien stopped keeping her at arm's length. He still spoke sparingly, but the words came softer. Leaving for the office he might toss over his shoulder, drive safe. If she stayed late at the studio, the car was already idling downstairs before she even called. When a client got handsy during a price haggle, her phone vibrated, Lucien's name on the screen. Hand him the phone, was all he said. Whatever followed turned the man chalk white. He agreed to full price and apologized non-stop. Sophie rang Lucien back, voice low with gratitude. Thank you. A small pause. You're Caldwell. Humiliate you and you humiliate me. Simple math. The logic was cold, yet she heard the shelter in it. Still, "Thank you." From that night on she tried stepping toward him instead of waiting for crumbs. When he came home she met him with a cup of tea kept at exactly the right warmth. She curled up nearby with a book while he read contracts. Poured over coffee rising between them like quiet incense. When trips loomed she packed his suitcase days early, tucking stomach tablets into the inner pocket because she had noticed the subtle way he pressed a hand to his side after too many airline meals. He let her stay. He even began needing the small routines, the gentle congee that settled his stomach after late board meetings, the precise bitter bloom of her pour-over coffee. If she spent the night at the workshop, the apartment felt echoing and off-key. He would wander it restlessly, loosening his tie, finally ending up in the kitchen staring at the coffee machine as though it had personally betrayed him. Without recognizing the shift, he started watching her. A new dress, his gaze tracked her a second longer. A frown over a sketch. He heard himself ask, "Problem with the curve?" When she reached the finals of jewelry, he quietly phoned 2 trustees and a sponsor, sweeping obstacles off the path before she ever sensed them. Their temperature rose degree by degree. Lucien quit dragging dates home at 2 a.m. Instead, he asked her to accompany him to a friend's gallery opening. Someone raised a glass and teased, "You two are getting disgustingly sweet." Lucien didn't argue. He simply angled a glance at Sophie, the corner of his mouth lifting a millimeter, practically a grin on his private emotional Richter scale. That glance became her summit. All her patient, unshowy giving had finally pulled a response from him. On the ride home she rested her head against the cool window and allowed herself a bigger vision, let the bond settle a little more. Then maybe a baby, a real family to fill Caldwell with noise other than board meeting arguments. She whispered the dream to her best friend, who laughed. "See, I said Lucien has a heart. Your rainy season is over." Sophie smiled so wide her cheeks hurt, eyes shining like someone who had just been handed tomorrow. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would be shattered by the same man who had finally given it to her. Chapter 4, Sudden Frost and Shattered Skies. Jewelry reached its final round. Sophie worked through 3 consecutive dawns, refining the piece she called Starfall, a sweep of paved diamonds engineered to mimic a meteor shearing across the night. Hidden in the setting was her coded vow. Even the briefest light could blaze unforgettable. Finals night she wore soft lilac silk and the sapphire Lucien had given her. Stepped onto the stage confident and bright. Applause washed over her. Judges praised the daring geometry of the drop. For one shimmering minute she believed her constellation had aligned. Then the huge LED wall flickered and a recording blared through the auditorium. Sophie's voice. Or something close. Discussing borrowing from a European atelier. Piecing together sources so no single influence could be proven. The clip had been shredded and spliced. It sounded like a confession of calculated theft. Gasps turned into roar. Cameras flashed like rupturing stars. Judges conferred in tight whispers. Sophie stood paralyzed, ice flooding her veins. She had never said those sentences in that order. Someone had forged her ruin. Instinctively, she searched the front row. Lucien was on his feet, face dark marble. She thought he would stride up, bark at the technicians to cut the feed, shield her as he had before. Instead, he lifted the microphone a staffer handed him. Voice glacial, a sterling designer. "And this is the standard. Copy someone else's sketches. Still dare to parade them on stage. You've disgraced the Caldwell name." Each word drove straight through her chest. Her vision washed red. "Lucien, it's a trap. You know me, believe me." His eyes were winter itself. Evidence shouts louder than tears. "I misread you, Sophie." He set the mic down and walked out, coat swirling like an executioner's cape. The world collapsed in slow motion, audience whispers. Reporters lunging, stage lights scorching. She managed to descend the steps, legs numb, fleeing down the corridor until the carpet blurred with tears. At home she locked the bedroom, sank to the rug, and sobbed until morning drained into gray daylight. Lucien never returned that night. When the sun was high she dragged herself to Caldwell headquarters, waited outside his office for hours, rehearsing explanations. Elevator doors slid open and there he was, Giselle attached to his arm, glossy magazine smile intact. The actress cooed, "Lucien, where should we eat?" His answering chuckle was the first time Sophie had heard him laugh since the night he gave her the necklace. The sight punched all air from her lungs. The man who had begun to feel like home now looked at her as if she were a smudge on the marble floor. He guided Giselle past without a word, doors clicking shut behind them like the final bolt on a gate she would never reopen. The instant Lucien spotted Sophie, his face went arctic. "What are you doing here?" I need to explain what happened yesterday," she said, voice quavering. The recording was doctored, spliced together. "Will you just listen?" "Not interested." He cut her off, tone glacial, effective immediately. "You're barred from every sterling matter. And don't show your face at Caldwell Caldwell again. You're a headache I don't need. Giselle, lounging beside him, manufactured a pout. Caldwell, is this the missus? Why is she crying? Did I do something to upset her? Nothing to do with you. Lucien brushed Giselle's hand in reassurance, then turned back to Sophie. Get lost. That single word shattered what little dignity Sophie had left. She stared at the two of them, picture perfect, poisonous, and felt her last hope dissolve like snow hurled into a bonfire, gone before it even hit the flames. She spun away, staggering. Outside Caldwell, the sky split open. Rain soaked her to the bone and iced the last ember in her chest. She didn't see Lucien's mask slip the moment she vanished. Giselle studied his shadowed face. Caldwell, do you still care about her? Don't pry. He stepped into the elevator, doors sealing like a tomb. He cared too much, but the recording had arrived from a rival and implicated Caldwell interests. He'd had to play brute. He hadn't guessed how deep the blade would go. Sophie ran a fever that refused to break. Alone in her apartment, she drifted in and out of delirium until the doorbell shrilled. Adrian stood outside, arms full of ibuprofen, sports drinks, and gentle congee. Your assistant called. She hadn't seen you all day and couldn't reach Lucien. He eased her onto the mattress, coaxed 2 capsules down her throat, then spoon-fed her the warm porridge a little at a time. You need something in your stomach or the meds will eat you alive. Tears slid sideways into her hair. In her ugliest hour, the man she'd kept at arm's length was the one holding the bowl. For 3 days Adrian refused to leave. He sautéed soft vegetables, brewed herbal tea, tidied the rooms, streamed her favorite old comedies. Between naps he talked childhood flashbacks of 2 adjacent houses on Maple Lane. Sophie the timid tag-along, bullied by bigger kids, until Adrian marched in with scraped knees and flying fists. Sophie wailing over crooked sketches of butterflies while Adrian redrew wing after wing until she smiled. The jade hairpin he'd bought with months of saved allowance, the first birthday gift she'd ever received. Remember the ridge above Riverdale? He laughed. You slipped, ripped your jeans, and swore you'd never speak to me again, then showed up next morning with a bigger basket demanding a rematch. She laughed too, eyes brimming. Those memories were sunrise-colored, weightless, before boardroom takeovers, before a marriage that felt like a merger gone toxic. I'm sorry, Adrian, she whispered, for pushing you away. I never asked for an apology, he said. I only want you safe. She saw him whole now, the steady helm who'd steered Vance through 2 cash flow collapses, the executive who paid suppliers on time and mentored interns. While she reeled from the jewelry fiasco, he quietly phoned judges, stitched timelines, until a folder landed on her duvet. Zane edited the audio and bribed 2 panelists, he told her. Here's the paper trail. Sophie traced the signatures with a shaking finger, truth in hand, and it changed nothing. Lucien's verdict still rang in her skull. You've disgraced the Caldwell name. If you want to go public, I'll back you, Adrian said. If you want out of the marriage, I'll still back you. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. His pledge wrapped around her like a quilt fresh from the dryer. For the first time since the wedding bells, she wondered if starting over might be possible. Before she could choose, Sterling imploded. A flagship development hit a regulatory wall. Loans were called overnight. Classic cash flow collapse. Sterling collapsed with it. Oxygen mask clamped to his face in Riverdale's ICU. Sophie took the helm mid-hurricane. She begged every bank, every ally. All cited the same invisible barrier. Caldwell disapproval. With no moves left, she walked back into Lucien's tower. She waited outside his corner office for 3 hours, knees grinding against marble, until the doors finally hissed open. Lucien stared down at her, expression unreadable. What is this performance? Please, she rasped, tears streaking mascara into war paint. Dad's in cardiac care. Sterling can't fall. I'll do anything. Sign divorce papers. Walk away with nothing. Just help us survive. A muscle jumped in his jaw. For a beat she thought he'd kneel and lift her up. Then Victor's warning replayed. Touch that project and Caldwell bleeds. He steeled his voice. I can't. Sterling's mess is yours to mop. We're married, she cried. Horse. You'll watch my family drown so your balance sheet stays tidy. Do you even have a heart? Married? He gave a bitter laugh. Our wedding was a contract. One party defaults, the other cuts losses. Business 101. The words snapped the final thread. She rose on numb legs, wiped her face clean of pleas, and looked at him as though he were a stranger behind Lucien's familiar eyes. Then I finally see you, clearly. She turned on her heel and walked away, every step ringing with finality. The instant she cleared the revolving doors of the Caldwell Tower, she tipped her head back. The sun was blinding, yet her heart felt colder than the dead of winter. She was finished with Lucien, utterly and forever. Sophie went straight from Caldwell to the hospital. Adrian was already there, clasping Sterling's hand, speaking in low, soothing tones. When he spotted her, he crossed the room at once. Sophie, you're here. Don't worry, your dad's going to pull through. Adrian, I know about Sterling. He broke in gently. I've had Vance's finance team wire the funds to keep the company afloat, and every medical bill is covered. Tears slipped down her cheeks again. Tears of gratitude this time, when she had needed someone most. Adrian had stepped in without hesitation. From the bed Sterling looked from Adrian to Sophie, voice frail. Sweetheart, Adrian's a good man. I was wrong to force you into that strategic marriage. From now on, follow your heart. Sophie nodded, slipping her hand into Adrian's. His palm was warm, steady, a harbor she could finally call home. Lucien, meanwhile, lost all appetite for work the moment she left. He stared out the window, hollow inside. He kept seeing Sophie on her knees, the plea in her eyes, the unflinching set of her shoulders as she'd walked away. Each memory drove a blade between his ribs. Regret crashed over him. He should never have been so cruel, should never have spoken words designed to maim. He wanted to sprint after her, to tell her he would save Sterling, would do anything for her, but his feet felt bolted to the floor. He didn't yet grasp that letting go this time meant losing her for good. Chapter 7, The Blazing Summer. Paths diverged the day Sterling was discharged. Sophie filed for divorce. She laid the papers in front of Lucien, voice flat. Lucien, let's end this. Lucien stared at her neat signature, Sophie, and the sight stabbed him. He tore the document to confetti. No, not happening. On what grounds? Her eyes were calm, almost indifferent. Our marriage was a transaction. The deal is done. We're even. Done? He closed the distance and clamped her wrist so hard bones ground. You are my wife, today and always. I won't sign. Stop lying to yourself. She yanked free. You've never loved me before. Now, or ever. Let me go, and free yourself while you're at it. She walked out without a backward glance. The empty office panicked him, he sensed, maybe for the first time, that she might truly vanish. From that day Lucien became a man possessed, determined to win her back. He deployed every Caldwell resource to settle Sterling's remaining debts, and transferred a chunk of his own Caldwell shares into her name. Every evening he waited outside Sterling's boutique clutching white roses. In full view of the press he issued a public apology, acknowledging every wound he dealt. Sophie never responded. She moved out of Caldwell into her own apartment. His calls went to voicemail. His texts unread. She dodged every event he might attend. Only then did Lucien realize what a bastard he'd been. He had shredded the girl who once looked at him with hope. And when he finally wanted to make amends, the window had slammed shut. Memories ambushed him at night. The gentle congee she used to bring every dawn, the aroma of her hand-poured coffee, her poised smile at galas, the sure brilliance she displayed at jewelry. Each detail etched itself deeper until he understood. Sophie had carved her initials on his heart. What he felt wasn't pride of possession. It was love, raw and irreversible. Love that had arrived too late. Sophie and Adrian grew steadier by the day. Adrian pressed her for nothing, simply stayed near. When design deadlines exhausted her, he massaged the knots from her shoulders. When moods dipped, he drove her to the coast. When trouble surfaced, he materialized before she could ask. One star-drunk evening he proposed. Under a sky strewn with diamonds he knelt, offering a ring of his own design, a modest sapphire winking at its center, his promise of eternal guardianship. Sophie, I know you've been hurt. Give me the chance to spend my life proving that love can be safe. Will you marry me? Tears shimmered, but her smile was radiant. Yes. Riverdale's rumor mill flared with congratulations. Lucien heard the news from a hospital bed. Weeks of drinking had shredded his stomach. Pale as the sheets, he stared at cloudless blue outside the window, the same shade as their wedding day. A single tear slid into his hairline. The marriage born of profit expired in the scorch of that summer. After discharge Lucien left Riverdale. He settled in a remote mountain town and opened a tiny bookstore, read, sipped tea, traded small talk. Time sanded the edges off his old arrogance. Occasionally friends relayed updates. Sophie and Adrian's modest, heartfelt ceremony, her exploding jewelry fame, the baby on the way. Each report stung, yet peace rode in on the ache. Years later Lucien returned to Riverdale. He retook the helm of Caldwell, rebuilt it to its former might. He never dated. No woman ever waited at his gate. At a charity auction their paths crossed again. Sophie balanced a toddler on her hip, cheeks round with laughter. Adrian's hand rested at the small of her back. Lucien approached, a polite tilt of the head. Sophie, Adrian. Good to see you. She's beautiful. Caldwell. Sophie answered with equal courtesy, eyes tranquil. Brief pleasantries finished. Lucien turned away, stride sure. He understood. Some people, once missed, stay missed. That blazing summer of love and wreckage had sealed itself in the past. Riverdale's sun still scorches, lighting the way home for everyone, while tales of dynasties, deals, love and loss sink quietly into the city's murmuring river, becoming legend.